Hey, if you'd like to earn CEUs for this webinar, join the Safeopedia community at the link in the description below. Now on to the show.
Hey, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us at the Safety Connect conference for 2025. And joining our session on 911 call compliance is more than a technology issue, presented by Robert Harris. Robert Lee Harris is the president of Communications Advantage Incorporated, a vendor independent consultancy focused on cost optimization for premise and cloud-based services. He developed a 911 Comply Point audit and certification program for Carey's Law and Ray Baum's Act. With over 20 years of experience helping enterprises deploy technology solutions, Robert is a longtime NoJitters.com contributor on IT cost management and emerging trends. Be sure and check out the rest of his bio for more information. And with that, Robert, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and hello, everybody. I was telling Brian earlier that this is actually my first safety conference. I've given this presentation and really been an evangelist for call compliance for 911 services in the technology field. And a lot of what I tell people is you need to engage your safety team, or you need to engage your campus security. But this is the first time I presented to the non-technical audience. So thank you for participating and listening. So 911 call compliance is more than a technology issue, is the title. And what has really driven 911 call compliance is two federal laws. And when I say two federal laws, that doesn't mean there aren't other laws. There's actually plenty of laws in OSHA about safe communications and timely communications. There's state laws that are similar to this and add their own flavor. But this is really what made the telephone equipment manufacturers and telecom managers stand up and take notice and created the challenge for telecom and IT departments. The first is Carey's Law. And Carey's Law began in Texas. It was the result of a tragic incident where Carrie Hunt, a woman who was staying in a hotel, was killed by her estranged husband. Meanwhile, her daughter tried to call 911, I believe, 6 times, and because there were no instructions on the telephone, she did not know how to get out. Her grandfather later came and after understanding the incident, made it his national crusade to make Carey's Law the law of the land, so that you can directly dial from a telecom system, and that the organization that you're dialing from has to be notified of the call. So that's the result of Carey's Law. Uh, I would say that that's really requirements for your internal system. The second law, which was passed at the same time, these were both became law in 2020, is Ray Baum's Act. And Ray Baum's Act ensures that a dispatchable location is provided. So what this means essentially is if you have a large multi-story office building or you have a multi-building campus, you can't just give the main address anymore. It has to give a dispatchable location. And these are requirements that are for data that is transmitted to the 911 center or the public safety answering point. I have it abbreviated there as PSAP. So just some definitions just to help. MLTS stands for multi-line telephone systems. And an MLTS operator is the organization managing the telephone systems. This is kind of tricky because an MLTS operator you might think if you have Zoom or Teams or some kind of a hosted telephone system that they're the operator. But as far as these laws concerned, that's not the case. It's really the end user and the end user's leadership that has responsibility for complying with these laws. And the other term is call originator. This is the location or the system making the 911 call. I want to talk about a couple of words in the law that are stumbling blocks for MLTS operators, or for the organization that has to manage and make sure their 911 calls are accurate. The first stumbling block is conspicuous notification. And I'll be giving an example where we had to do a correction on that. It's kind of a subjective term. What does conspicuous really mean? And the other stumbling block is technically feasible. When it says that a dispatchable location has to be provided in Ray Baum's Act. It says it has to be to the extent that is technically feasible. And what does that really mean? Organizations really struggle with that. Does that mean we have to send our network engineers out every day to check network ports to make sure the address is right? What is technical feasibility? So there's a lot of concern about that, and that creates a challenge for the IT and telecom departments. And with good reason, because if you look at this next slide, this is the extent of the liability for 911 calls. The Carey's Law, the original Carey's Law incident led to a $41 million verdict that actually was used to start the Carey Hunt Foundation, which made Carey's Law the law of the entire United States through the FCC. Uh, it wasn't just for the 911 compliance. There were some other incidents that were negligent, but it really made people get up and take notice that there is a huge liability here. And a big part of it was because the 911 system failed and there weren't adequate instructions. It's important to note that this case this case was settled before Carey's Law came into effect and before Ray Baum's Act were in effect. So there was no law that was violated by Wyndham Hotel Systems and OM Lodgings and all the people who were involved in the case. It was just negligence. So we don't always look at just the letter of the law. We look at where's there a liability and really where's there a risk. Where are we not keeping people safe? I'm sure that in the occupational safety business, that's part of your mindset all along. The next case is TJ Mister. He drowned at a summer camp, and the family settled for $8 million. They hadn't set up its internet-based phone system. Maintenance staff called 911, and it went to a dispatch center in Colorado, and Colorado transferred the call to St. Louis, and then it went to voicemail. So they actually had a physician testify that the delay in getting support to the swimming pool caused his death. And this was a tragic incident. A playground was named after TJ, but that's not the sort of legacy you want your organization to have. I will say, if you look at that case, there's a lot more settlements that we'll never know about because they're under non-disclosure with private organizations. This is a public case involving a county, so of course we do have some information on it. On the other side, what are there was a $17 million settlement awarded in a delayed 911 response case. And we've all heard those news stories about some very badly handled 911 call. We've heard those for probably 10 years where the operator was negligent and it resulted in some serious injury or death. And there have been lots of cases about 911 centers, but what's different is since Ray Baum's Act and Carey's Law are in effect, this is now a shared responsibility for location accuracy. It's not just what the 911 dispatch center can do, it's also the information that you transmit. So this becomes a very serious thing. Uh, as far as FCC fines and settlements, the FCC actually has the right, if you are not in compliant with these laws, to charge $10,000 and then a certain amount per day. They have not gone against individual call originators yet. They have been right now focusing their enforcement on 911 outages and on the telco network. I think what they want to do is make sure that the telco network and the carrier side has all their ducks in a row before they start looking at customers who are blatantly violating these laws. So I would say the key point of this is that we don't want to just check off the boxes. And unfortunately, I had somebody, one of the first times we helped a client work on this, they said, aren't we just kind of checking off the boxes? And that stuck in my head all the time. Is no, we really want to integrate the 911 calling procedures into your whole organizational safety plan. So who is the business user for 911 call management? Here's an analogy I give people. You have systems in your organization like Salesforce, for example. And the IT department isn't the business user for Salesforce. It's probably the sales department or the customer service department. Might have an application like SAP, and that could be the HR department that's the business user. So every enterprise application has a primary user. There are some that do belong to the IT department, things like network monitoring tools, for example, and maybe help desk software. but the assumption is that the 911 call management belongs to the telecom department, that it's just a telecom problem and nobody else has to think about it. But if you think about it logically with that analogy, it belongs to the safety team. It really is a safety issue, not a telecom issue. So that's why we, by looking at it as more than as a shared safety obligation, we take an occupational safety approach. This has a good benefit that we are doing more than checking off the boxes. So when people ask us, "Oh, what do we need to do that's technically feasible, or what do we need to do to make it conspicuous?" That's the they're a lot of times they're asking about the minimum, and we don't look at about the minimum. We look at an overall plan that's actually manageable within the organization. So the occupational safety approach, there's an OSHA duty to provide a safe workplace. So it aligns with that. And really, probably that was these lawsuits before there were any FCC or telecom related laws. That's probably where the liability was. It also does incorporate compliance with Kerry's Law and Ray Baum's Act into your whole safety plan, and that it gives continual improvement. You're starting to think about the risks. You're starting to think about the whole life cycle of the 911 call and thinking about the processes, everything from how you educate people to what do first responders see when they get to the site. So we involve IT department, HR, security, and safety, and the workers themselves. As we all know, occupational safety really is a responsibility of workers to report and to be aware of the requirements. I'll contrast that with the IT and telecom only approach. That focuses just on meeting the technical requirements. And really, if there is a business user, which is the safety department, we don't want to just meet the minimum requirements. And it lacks the kind of oversight that we see and the kind of evaluations we see in a safety plan. There may be missed procedural and training obligations that are required under OSHA and local rules. This is literally true. There are states such as Massachusetts that not only require everything we went over in Kerry's Law and Ray Baum's Act, but also require that employees are trained properly on how and when to call 911. It focuses on the equipment and checklists, and workers are often unaware of their responsibilities. For example, updating nomadic addresses. When we go into an organization if that has something like Zoom or Teams or anything where people can just take their laptop home and they can still be on conference calls or still call out to the phone network from their devices or even from their mobile phone, I would say about 60 to 70% of them have not configured their location detection and and don't understand how to update their location when they're working off site. And what does this mean? This means when the call is made, it's going to show the main phone number that could be 1,000 miles away if they're working somewhere remote at a conference, for example. And then there's no formal mechanism with the IT telecom only approach for training and for awareness. One of the examples I give to show the value proposition to the IT department is just what I said before. What do you want to do? Do you want to have your network engineers go out and search for Wi-Fi access points that are giving the wrong address and search for network switches that are giving the wrong address? Or do you want to equip your minions of end users to know how to report things to you, know how to test things using the test number, and feel like they're comfortable that they're not being a nuisance by reporting when there are problems, and then giving them feedback on the result when you've corrected the issues. That's the ISO 45001 continual improvement framework that we use for 911 compliance. It really reduces risks, and it shows better effort than I would say 95% of organizations make in making sure that their 911 procedures are correct. This is an example. We do two different types of audits. The first is a procedural audit. We look at user instructions, we look at user onboarding, we look at documentation that is in their intranet. We actually get a login so that we can scour around the intranet and look for information that's outdated. And this is an example of one we found. it was actually worse than I say in here. They actually had instructions that said you don't have to give your home address on your Zoom phone if you're not comfortable. So it was we made a huge improvement. There was a lack of end user guidance on how to set up 911 and updates, and there were no instructions for enabling the location permissions on PCs and Macs. No mandated compliance policy, and that's important when you have a when you have when you're telling people to enable locations on their PCs and Macs, you have to explain what it's for. You'll have a lot of people who say, I'm not going to be part of the surveillance state, or how dare you violate my privacy. You have to tell them that it's specifically for 911 calls, and that's the only thing that's going to be visible and used for. In this case, there was no 933 training. 933 is a number specific to a lot of cloud phone systems where you can call and it will read you back the address that 911 would see if if you were to call 911. And there was no mechanism for reporting if there was any kind of a problem. So these are the things that we helped them work out policies. We gave them examples from other organizations that did a better job, and and saw a drastic improvement in the number of people who were identifying their location correctly. In the emergency operations, we found an organization that had no written 911 response procedure in emergency operations. So think about this. You have Kerry's Law, where it says it has to give conspicuous notification, and this security department did not know what to do with that notification. Now, the law itself does not say, it does not dictate what you have to do with the notification. So but common sense and occupational safety would be you have to do something with it. The emergency alerts were via email only. This did not meet the requirement for conspicuous because they were buried under whatever other emails came in. And what we ended up doing was putting in a pop-up system on the security department's desktops that was conspicuous, and we wrote written procedures to make sure that they understood what to do when 911 calls came in, what information would be displayed to them, and how to take action on those. Oh, these are not 911 calls to them. These are notification of 911 calls from the campus out to the 911 center, just to be clear. Oops. This is an example of we look at a lot of floor plans and a lot of heat maps, and we classify buildings by different risks. This is a college, and we classify them by how many people that actually use the phone system are likely to be there. Uh, we look at whether they have closed spaces or open spaces. So just for example, this one up in the top corner is a stadium. And yes, you see a lot of overlap here with all these different areas. But if first responders come in, they're going to be able to see where the emergency is most likely, regardless of which floor of the stadium it's on. That would be a low risk area. On top of that, you're not going to have a lot of office people that are using their Zoom or their Teams phone in that stadium. It's mainly going to be mobile devices. This is an example where this one that's in the center is an example where it's an administrative area, and but it really doesn't have a lot of overlap. You have one general area that you would put as the location. And then in the back here is a high risk area where you have a lot of administrative offices, so lots of telephone system users potentially, and a lot of overlap with a lot of closed spaces. So we look at everything, including separate entry points. If there's multiple entry points and you have the signal bleeding through from one end to another, that can create a risk. A lot of factors go into it to put this risk score together. A lot of people ask me, you're talking about voice over IP soft phones if you're talking about the wireless network and who actually uses those. And surprisingly, the more people get rid of their hard desktop phones, the more 911 calls are made from soft phones. Because if you have a hard desktop phone and you have a mobile phone and then you have a laptop telephone, I'll call it, or a soft phone, you have three options to call 911. Most likely you'll use your mobile phone. Statistically, that's 80 to 90% of calls. But once you've eliminated the hard phone, if your mobile phone is either out of reach, and there have been cases where the person who was the threat actually had the mobile phone, your only option becomes that soft phone. So according to the 911 industry, there is an increase in calls from voice over IP soft phones to 911. So it is something to be concerned with. The other thing is we know in the safety industry, we don't just plan uh, we plan for the unexpected. We don't plan for normal circumstances. So that's how we look at risk. And what we do with that risk is we determine where we're going to target our on-site walkthrough and audit with. This is an example. This actually is a very technical issue, but it's worth looking at. These telephone systems, you have to work with your 911 center because they often have character limitations of what they can actually see on their screens. This is an example. It's kind of an old system, but same limitations of a 911 center dispatch screen. And a lot of times they only have 19 or 20 characters displayed for what we call the supplemental address information. So they'll have the main address, they'll have the city, they'll have the state. I don't know if they have the zip code, but that's not here or there. And then they'll have a supplemental address field. Some of these phone systems allow you to put in up to 70 characters, but if the 911 center only can see 19 to 20 characters, here's what can happen. This is 19 characters, and what they were transmitting was law library second floor Wi-Fi AP. So they were showing it was the access point and Wi-Fi, and what it looked like when it got displayed at the 911 center was law library second floor W. Now, what do you think that W looked like to the 911 center? It looked like directional. It looked like it was west. But the client wanted the additional information for their own security team, which was transmitted internally to the 911 center. So we created a pipe delimitator system where everything in the first 19 characters belonged to the 911 center, and everything beyond that they could write whatever they wanted that helped the campus safety team. This is different, by the way, for multiple 911 centers. Some can handle up to 36. Some actually will truncate it into a GIS map where they can see it on mapping instead of on the characters. So a lot of differences, and really you have to work with your individual 911 center or your whole group of them if you have multiple locations to determine what they need to see. So we do on-site testing. With our on-site testing, we test 10% or more of the total phones, and we do real 911 calls. Now, people ask if they have some way to test where it will show that 933, or you can just look at records. Why real 911 calls? I will show you some of the results of that with a real test result with the PSAP later, but real 911 calls are the only way that you can determine what the 911 center sees. And what we do is we plan in advance with the 911 center, and then we test the high risk areas. If you remember that whole matrix we had where we identify high, medium, or low risk, we'll test every building. We'll test the ones that we've identified as high risk areas. We will also let the organization identify risks because they may know about things. One example that we didn't catch just from our remote floor mapping and from our heat maps was a hallway under a swimming pool. We would have never known about that to test. So we also do work with the organization to make sure that they identify risky areas that they want tested as well. Any kind of an emergency phone like outdoor call boxes or anything like a red phone, those are all tested. And we test every phone type. If they're using a client, a phone client that can go on a cellular device, we test that. If they're using PC phones, we test that. Any kind of call boxes and any kind of voice over IP phones. So make sure that there's a sample of everything and that and focus on all the high risk areas. So what we do is we confirm that the dispatchable location data is accurate, that the call routing is correct, and that the emergency telecommunicators get the clear supplemental address information. Supplemental address, remember, is that location description that can be anywhere from 19 to 36 characters. Lots of scheduling and coordination with the public safety answering point. Uh, we make sure we're doing that during off hours. We had one that just got an extra staff member. He assigned a trainee to it, and that worked really well. validating real-time notifications. We're making sure that their safety, security, or campus police department is getting notified of the live calls and are able to call back to the incident. And then we provide detailed test reports and action plans for correcting where we find issues. Here's an example of something we see on the walkthrough that we take note of, signage. I make a joke that with private colleges, there's a wall that's named after every single different donor, and this is a great example of that. The building is actually called Baker Sports Complex, and that's what the labeling was being sent to 911. Lots of donors and lots of names, but the only signage you see from the street is this here at the bottom, the Harry L. Vance Athletic Center. So we had them modify that, even though the building was officially on the floor plans, the Baker Sports Complex. Let's label it Vance Athletic so that they see exactly what they're looking for when they're dispatched to the location. This is a fun one. Uh, this actually was called Ordway Biology Station, but when you went by, it didn't say Ordway. Do you see that sign in the left-hand corner? That's actually the sign that says Ordway, but to most people, it looks like a real estate sign. What's more visible and prominent is the two-sided sign that says Biology Station on the other side of the street. So we had them change it to Biology Station just so, and this was about 30 miles from the campus, but just so that 911 first responders would find the right location. It didn't matter. They didn't care that it said Ordway on that sign because that's not what they see. They just want to get there correctly. More testing, out of service telephones. These are phones that were actually part of the old system at one of the sites. They looked like you could very easily and reasonably call 911, but these were dead phones. So even though the letter of the law says your MLTS system or your current phone system, that doesn't stop us from dinging people if they have phones that don't work on the wall. It seems very reasonable, especially with this outdoor phone, that you would be likely to try and call 911 from it. So we make sure they do corrections on those. And then this Wi-Fi signal overlap. This is an example of a library. This was on the third floor. This last slide on the right, it was showing the fifth floor. Uh, with Wi-Fi signal overlap, there's going to be a little bit. Sometimes you show a proximity instead of an exact room. First responders have told me they'd rather have a general area to search than kick down the wrong door. But when it comes to overlap between floors, that doesn't meet the minimum requirements. We always find a way to correct, even if it involves getting wireless engineers out to adjust the signal. Bleeding between floors is a critical problem. This is an example of a I've anonymized some of these. There really is no conscientious college, so but this is an example of information that was up in the dorms where you call your RA and then the public safety number is this number. Obviously, that's not a real zip code, but the public safety number really wasn't the right number for life-threatening emergencies. They should call 911. They just had no instructions in the dorms for calling 911 and didn't make any differentiation between just calling public safety because, there's noise or whatever reason versus a life-threatening emergency where you would want first responders to get there. One of their original reasons for doing this is because their old phone system did not have simultaneous notification. So the 911 center would probably call the campus security anyway, and the campus securities would be the first one there. But because of Kerry's law compliance, any system has to automatically notify of the call and location to the campus or to the building safety, so there's no need to call them first. So we had them update all those procedures and tell all of the resident advisors not to put signs up that decided where they call 911. So you can see there's a lot more than just the Carries On Ray Bombs Act. We go ahead and make sure they have a whole plan and that they are educating people and that people know how to report issues and they know how to update their phones as part of this. Oops. This is the last thing. Uh, we work with the 911 center, whatever the local 911 center is, and we compare notes. They actually give us as we do our walkthrough, we look at where we have issues. Where there's no issue, they get the right address and they answer it. PSAP issues is interesting. I had a county tell me that the procedure that we're doing is going to give them better data than 90% of the callers in the county. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful. But the problem is that meant that their 911 operators weren't used to looking for that additional information. So there actually became a training exercise for the 911 dispatchers on how to look for better information from this particular organization. So yeah, we look and compare notes with the 911 center, and they're always they really like when people make their job easier by following 911 procedures and making sure that the locations are accurate. So they're always very cooperative, even though we sometimes make 120 calls, 150 calls a day. This is some additional information just on 911 laws and some vendors, and then our site that has our whole audit and compliance program. So thank you for your time, and I believe we have time for questions if there are any.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. It was amazing information. Now I'm watching that thinking, man, I was oblivious to all that. So it's people talk about our jobs often are not life and death. Well, here it's good to see so much energy and continuous improvement in something that obviously is life or death. Yeah, we do have some questions. First one here is from Nick Cato. Is there anything being developed to counteract possible AI calls coming in that could cause distractions to emergency response teams?
Absolutely. That's been a big problem. I did see a demonstration at a 911 conference over the summer where they showed how people could, it's called swatting, obviously, where people could make a whole background sound like there were gunshots and screaming, and it's a terrible problem. And ironically, most of the tools that they're trying to develop are AI tools that counter that. The 911 centers do have a way of detecting suspicious calls. For example, if you get a single call from somewhere where there was supposed to be a train wreck or a big building fire, it's tricky. They can also see sometimes, usually on swatting, the numbers are suspect. They don't call from just a normal mobile phone that's traceable. They'll call from a non-traceable number. So they do have ways to do that, but it is a serious problem. Obviously, when they dispatch resources, it wastes the resources and it puts unsuspecting people in danger. But yeah, that is something that within the 911 industry, both through technology and processes, is being addressed.
It's nice to know that it's something they're working on because, yeah, I can see that as being an ongoing issue. Next question from Ryan Jacobson. In your opinion, what is the biggest adjustment we can make to our operations to ensure comms are effective?
I would say the biggest adjustment really is user training. That's when I say, a lot of times people's IT and telecom departments, they do a pretty good job of going around and mapping the locations as much as possible. But then you look at their reports, and 70% of the users who are on some kind of soft phone devices don't know how to update the locations or don't think it's important. People always say, "Oh, we're really going to discipline someone for not doing that." And my analogy is, do you discipline, you have a network acceptable use policy. Do you discipline people for visiting an inappropriate website? And usually the answer is, yeah, they would get fired. So it's like, okay, well, this is a safety issue. So, why isn't there an enforceable policy for a safety issue? So yeah, having policies that are enforceable and educating users on how to update their devices and how to be aware of 911 location accuracy and how to test, that's, I think, has the biggest impact.
Oh, awesome. We do have a question here is from uh, Myrna Sanchez. Is there any way we can get, are you going to make your PowerPoint slides available where people can download them or?
Oh, sure. Is there a place? I don't know if there's a place to put that on the conference site, but I'll be happy to.
Samantha, do you know? I'm not sure if she's still with us.
Yeah, I'm here. What are we looking to do?
We've got some people asking if we can make his PowerPoint slides available.
Yes, we will be making those available and we can get those out to people. This should be on demand in a couple of hours as well. So we'll make sure that we get that out to people.
Awesome. And yeah, then as Samantha said, we record all the sessions and the recording will be available within an hour or two after this. So yeah, and I agree. This is something that uh, this is one of those presentations everybody needs to see. As when you need 911 is not when you I mean you need to prepare in advance. I hate shooting from the hip when it is a safety issue to the magnitude that 911 is involved. So it's one of the things that I did right when I was a safety director for the world's largest fluorescent light factory, which was a very dangerous environment. It looked like it was designed by Stephen King. We had
Oh
fire, open
no.
flames, yeah, glass, high speed equipment. And we trained everyone to use 911 if there's an emergency, even call 911 first, then contact the safety people, but do 911 first. We had someone stand on a conveyor where they shouldn't have been, fell off, knocked himself out. We had a person immediately call 911, another person go out to the parking lot and wait for the ambulance. And then they contacted me. By the time I got to the person, the factory was so big that the first responders were already giving aid to the individual. So, I mean, it worked out perfectly. But I love, like your presentation shows the complexity of all this with the advent of tablets and people working using uh, tablets and laptops as opposed to just phones. Wow, our world is changing significantly.
Oh yeah, I would say, Brian, the biggest change is next generation 911, which is the technology that allows you to have mobile phone accuracy because it's on an IP network instead of the old radio tower network, just like all the apps we use like Uber and DoorDash. But that's going to create integrated multimedia systems. There's a lot of people who predict within 5 years, most 911 calls will not be made by humans. They will be made by security systems that will activate cameras. So more and more, you're going to see this merging into the safety industry, into all kinds of notification systems.
Amazing. Another thing I was clueless about, and that's why this information is so important and why you have conferences like this. That's great. If anyone else has any more questions for Robert while we have him, again, tremendous information. Do you have any last minute information you'd like to give or any parting information before we let everyone go?
Uh, Not really. I think I said it all along the way. I will say, I will emphasize, I've worked with organizations that didn't want to do this. They didn't want to, and they thought as long as we have an old phone system, we don't have to comply with these laws because it only took effect on systems after 2020 that were and the difficulty with that, they actually had an incident in a warehouse where someone had a heart attack. They didn't die, but there was a delay in 911 reaching them. Now you think about that, besides it just being the right thing to do to make sure that you're keeping your employees or your visitors safe, that guy, just because he didn't die doesn't mean there's not a liability. He might be thinking, I have some serious heart damage. What would have happened if 911 had gotten there sooner? So we shouldn't get to the point where we're just looking at what stops us from getting sued or stops us from getting fined. We really want to integrate this as part of our safety plan. And I would, if I was a safety professional, I would ask my IT department about that. I would ask them what they're doing with this and how they're complying.
Awesome. I hope everyone follows that advice. Here's another question. Are there possible repercussions or protections related to Kerry's law if a person calls 911 from their personal phone, but the campus requires you to call through their system instead?
They can't require you to call from either. They can't stop you from calling 911. A personal cell phone many times does have better accuracy if it's in depending on where it is. In other cases, it's only a half a mile away. And what we do is we look at what kind of technology the 911 center has, whether they have next generation 911, which will give that kind of application level accuracy, and tell them, make sure you inform people about how accurate or how inaccurate their mobile phone will be. Just set the right expectations. We did have one campus that said if you call from your cell phone, 911 will know where you are. And it's like, no, it's actually a 300-yard radius. So in some cases, there were whole
Uh,
buildings blocking where they called from. So, Yeah, there's no, you really can't dictate how people call 911. You can set expectations though about what will happen with each method.
Well, that's important. Your comment on the training. Again, you don't know what you don't know. So
Right.
more information, the better. Well, thanks, Robert. That was some amazing information. Like I said, it's a world that I was ignorant of, all that behind the scenes stuff. And even like making sure that if you have dead phones, that they're removed, things along that line. Some important stuff. So again, I thank you for your time. It was very valuable information. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And again, this will all be, the recording will be able to be you can activate it or get a hold of it just within a few hours. Robert, thank you. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Brian, and
Enjoy the
thanks everyone.